So as we begin our practice session for this afternoon, this 3-hour practice session, I'll start with reading a few more suttas from the Sakka Samyutta, the Samyutta Nikaya, and then I'll talk a little bit about practicing through the afternoon. And so for those who are either just joining in person or via Zoom, just a little bit of information about this image next to me. This is Sakka, Lord of the Devas, King of the Tāvatiṃsa heaven. According to the Sutta Digha Nikaya 21, is a stream enterer, and he attained stream entry upon hearing teachings of the Buddha, and so he counts as Savaka Sangha. So he's an Aryan disciple, or having reached a stage of liberation, one of the Buddha's at least semi-enlightened disciples, and made previous vows when in a previous existence when he was a human being, having made vows to not give rise to anger, or if anger arose, then to dispel it quickly. And so having cultivated a lot of Mettā, that provided the foundation for that being to be reborn as Sakka, the Lord of the Devas, in the current existence. And also had other vows such as being truthful and always honoring parents, always honoring elders. And so there's a couple more short teachings, vignettes about Sakka. And in the Buddhist cosmology, these Tāvatiṃsa devas are, from time to time, they're having battles and wars with the asuras, the demigods, who want to take over from these particular devas. And the asuras are known for being very brutal and violent, and the Tāvatiṃsa devas, who are trying to protect their realm, are known for following the teachings of Sakka, which is to have patient endurance and to try to endure ill-spoken words and ill-done actions, and try their best to not react to violence with more violence. So this particular sutta is called Victory by Well-Spoken Counsel. At Savatthi, bhikkhus, once in the past, the devas and the asuras were arrayed for battle. Then Vepa-chitti, Lord of the asuras, said to Sakka, Lord of the devas, Lord of the devas, let there be victory by well-spoken counsel. And Sakka replied, Vepa-chitti, let there be victory by well-spoken counsel. Then bhikkhus, the devas, and the asuras appointed a panel of judges, saying, These will ascertain what has been well spoken and badly spoken by us. Then Vepa-chitti, Lord of the asuras, said to Sakka, Lord of the devas, Speak a verse, Lord of the devas. When this was said, Sakka said to Vepa-chitti, You, Vepa-chitti, being the senior deva here, speak a verse. When this was said, Vepa-chitti, Lord of the asuras, recited this verse. Fools would vent their anger even more if no one would keep them in check. Hence, with drastic punishment, the wise man should restrain the fool. When bhikkhus Vepa-chitti, Lord of the asuras, spoke this verse, the asuras applauded, but the devas were silent. Then Vepa-chitti said to Sakka, Speak a verse, Lord of the devas. When this was said, Sakka, Lord of the devas, recited this verse. I myself think this alone is the way to check the fool. When one knows one's foe is angry, one mindfully maintains one's peace. When bhikkhus Sakka, Lord of the devas, spoke this verse, the devas applauded, but the asuras were silent. Then Sakka said to Vepa-chitti, Speak a verse, Vepa-chitti. When this was said, Vepa-chitti, Lord of the asuras, recited this verse. I see this fault, O Vasawa, in practicing patient endurance. When the fool thinks of you thus, he endures me out of fear. The dolt will chase you even more, as a bull does one who flees. When bhikkhus Vepa-chitti, Lord of the asuras, spoke this verse, the asuras applauded, but the devas were silent. Then Vepa-chitti said to Sakka, Speak a verse, Lord of the devas. When this was said, Sakka, Lord of the devas, recited these verses. Let it be whether or not he thinks, he endures me out of fear. Of goals that culminate in one's own good, none is found better than patience. When a person endowed with strength patiently endures a weakling, they call that the supreme patience. The weakling must be patient always. They call that strength no strength at all, the strength that is the strength of folly. But no one can reproach a person who is strong because guarded by Dhamma. One who repays an angry person with anger thereby makes things worse for himself. Not repaying an angry person with anger, one wins a battle hard to win. He practices for the welfare of both, his own and the others. When knowing that his foe is angry, he mindfully maintains his peace. When he achieves the cure of both, his own and the others, the people who consider him a fool are unskilled in the Dhamma. When bhikkhus, these verses were spoken by Sakka, Lord of the devas applauded, but the Asuras were silent. Then the panel of judges appointed by the devas and the Asuras said this: the verses spoken by Vepachiti, Lord of the Asuras, are in the sphere of punishment and violence, hence they entail conflict, contention, and strife. But the verses spoken by Sakka, Lord of the Devas, are in the sphere of non-punishment and non-violence, hence they entail freedom from conflict, freedom from contention, and freedom from strife. Sakka, Lord of the Devas, has won the victory by well-spoken counsel. In this way, bhikkhus, Sakka, Lord of the Devas, won victory by well-spoken counsel. So, and then there's the next sutta, this one's called the bird nests. At Savatī, bhikkhus, once in the past, the devas and the Asuras were arrayed for battle. In that battle, the Asuras won and the devas were defeated. In defeat, the devas withdrew toward the north while the Asuras pursued them. Then Sakka, Lord of the Devas, addressed his charioteer Mettā in verse. Avoid, Mettā, with your chariot pole, the bird nests in this silk cotton woods. Let's surrender our lives to the Asuras rather than make these birds nestless. Yes, your lordship, Mettā the charioteer replied, and he turned back the chariot with its team of 1,000 thoroughbreds. Then, bhikkhus, it occurred to the Asuras, now Sakka's chariot with its team of 1,000 thoroughbreds has turned back. The devas will engage in battle with the Asuras for a second time. Stricken by fear, they entered the city of the Asuras. In this way, bhikkhus, Sakka, Lord of the Devas, won a victory by means of righteousness itself. So those are a couple interesting reflections about Sakka, and then there's also this, just to read the very end of this sutta in Digha Nikaya 21. It's a fairly long sutta and a fairly old translation. And earlier in the sutta, it's Sakka asks the Buddha about the roots of conflict, and there's a really lovely progression about. I'll read the first paragraph, and then I'll just summarize the next few paragraphs. Sakka, ruler of the gods, put a question to the Lord Buddha. By what fetters are beings bound, gods, humans, Asuras, Nagas, Gandhabas, and whatever other kinds of beings there may be, whereby, although they wish to live without hate, harming, hostility, or maligning one another, and they wish to live in peace, and yet they live in hate, harming one another? This is Sakka's first question to the Lord, and the Lord replied, Ruler of the gods, it is the bonds of jealousy and avarice that bind beings so that, though they wish to live without hate, they live in hate, harming one another and hostile. And he asks, well, what gives rise to jealousy and avarice? What is their origin? How are they born? How do they arise? And the Buddha answers, jealousy and avarice, ruler of gods, take rise from like and dislike. This is their origin. This is how they are born. This is how they arise. When these are present, they arise. When these are absent, they do not arise. But, sir, what gives rise to like and dislike? Owing to the presence of what do they arise? Owing to the absence of what do they not arise? They arise, ruler of the gods, from desire. Owing to the presence of desire, like and dislike arise. Owing to the absence of desire, like and dislike do not arise. But, sir, what gives rise to desire? Desire, ruler of gods, arises from thinking. When the mind thinks about something, desire arises. But when the mind does not think about something, desire does not arise. But, sir, what gives rise to thinking? Thinking, ruler of the gods, arises from the tendency to proliferation. When this tendency is present, thinking arises. When it is absent, thinking does not arise. So that's when the Buddha is talking about the origins of conflict, he's talking about them originating first from jealousy and avarice, but then liking and disliking and so on, down to desire, thinking, and the tendency toward proliferation. So it's one way of looking at the roots of conflicts and also a kind of different form of dependent origination. Okay, so those are some unusual suttas with Sakka as at the center of them, either giving well-spoken counsel or asking the Buddha useful questions. And at the end of that sutta I was just reading, then Sakka actually says Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa 3 times. So that's really the root of that phrase that we do, is actually comes from Sakka. So we do that every day. So it's just good to know that the root of that particular chant comes from Sakka. He's a character that appears so much in the teachings, and it's good to know a little bit about him and where he comes from. So now we have this practice session for the afternoon, and I wanted to talk a little bit about just meditating in the afternoon, because it can be a difficult time to meditate, a difficult time to practice. And that period from after the meal until about 4 or 5 p.m. is generally a time when the mind will tend to be a little bit more dull, and the energy won't be as much geared toward peaceful mind states. The practice might feel a little bit more unpleasant. So if we actually do the sitting and walking meditation during the afternoon period, that really paves the way for the peace and well-being to arise during our practice periods in the evening time. So if we're trying to cultivate something like anapanasati and coupling that with Mettā practice, the spreading of the genuine well-wishing to ourselves and others, then because the mind isn't as clear during the afternoon period, then we might feel, well, it's not working out, so I might as well just throw in the towel and take a rest or stop practicing because this just isn't working. So sometimes we can interpret that, the sense of the mind not being clear, or there might be some hindrances, there might be drowsiness. We might not be able to see things so clearly in this afternoon period. But really, if we do practice during this time and we just go through that, then that builds a very, very strong foundation for our practice. And it's also just remembering what Longpo Viradamo said in the reading earlier today, is that it's not the nature of the experience that's important or the quality of the experience that's important, but it's the being present for and the awareness of the experience that's important. So it's not what we're experiencing that's important, but it's actually whether we're present for that experience or not. So if the experience is unpleasant, that's not necessarily a problem. And if the mind isn't that clear, that's not necessarily a problem. But are we able to be fully present for that experience? Or if we have a sense of resistance toward what we're experiencing, can we even be present for that resistance? So then we're able to actually relax into any type of experience, whatever the experience is in the moment. And as we go through the hours in the afternoon and do a longer practice session, then we can really start to get into touch with that. And it's okay if we actually lose the mindfulness for a period of time or get stuck in the drowsiness or the hindrances for a period of time. And we just come back and reestablish that sense of awareness with whatever we're experiencing. When we do that, though, what naturally tends to happen is the experience does tend to get more pleasant. But then we just have to keep reminding ourselves, keep establishing that mindfulness, reminding ourselves that, okay, present, aware. And we keep reminding ourselves of this throughout the afternoon. One thing that I'll do during the afternoon practice session is every 30 minutes, I'll hit the bell. So I found that there are these tricks, or you could call them pro tips, for practicing through the afternoon or practicing for many hours at a stretch, is that breaking it up into 30-minute chunks can be helpful. So you might think, no, there's no way I could sit for 2 hours, but I can sit for 30 minutes. So when the bell rings on the 30-minute mark, then we determine to just change postures on the bell ring. So when the bell rings, then if we feel like it, we can get up and do some walking meditation, or we can continue sitting. But if we're going to continue sitting, that means we're going to continue sitting for another 30 minutes. This helps us build up a sense of perseverance in our practice. So when the bell rings, we either say, okay, I'm going to walk for 30 minutes, or I'm going to sit for another 30 minutes. And if we want to walk for an hour or an hour and a half, that's okay too. So we do the sitting and walking meditation, but in those 30-minute chunks. That way, if we have the determination to want to sit a little bit longer, and we say, okay, there's no way I can sit for 2 hours, but I can sit for 30 minutes. At the end of that 30 minutes, bell rings. Oh, I think I could, I'm sure I could sit another 30 minutes. At the end of that 30 minutes, the bell rings. Oh, I think I could go another 30 minutes, and then so on. And then you've sat for an hour and a half or 2 hours. So that's one way to actually train oneself. But then the whole prospect of, if there's not those breaks, then the mind might have a hard time holding on to an idea of such a long time period. So we break it up into little chunks like that. And then if the legs are hurting, or there's maybe a lot of restlessness in the body, then the bell ring, we can change postures, can go do some walking meditation, go outside for a bit, and come back in 30 minutes later. So like I'll say I'll give a few more reflections. It's 1:20 now. I'll go until 1:30. So like at 1:30, we'll start at those half hours. We'll go 1:30, 2, 2:33, 3:34. And we'll break at 4, have a short break at 4, followed by the Q&A session. So for myself, I've struggled a lot with these afternoon practice sessions over the years, and found that when I am able to do them, the benefits, the fruits of that are always quite good. And so even though it is difficult to meditate, say starting at 1 p.m. and going till 4 p.m., that's considered a time when the drowsiness is going to arise more, the restlessness in the mind is going to arise more, the body might not be quite as comfortable, yet we do the practice and we push through at that time, and we will find it just makes such a big difference come the evening time. Because I've also had that experience of, say, okay, well, the mind is just dull, and practice doesn't seem to be very pleasant or going very well during the afternoon, so then just forgetting it, and I'll just wait till later. I'll just wait till later when the mind is brighter. But then, it's just going to be mediocre in the evening if we practice like that. If we plant the causes by doing our sitting and walking meditation in this early afternoon period, then really that is the cause for the brightness and the clarity to arise later. So again, what I'll do is we've got about 7 minutes until 1:30. So at 1:30, so we'll sit here until 1:30, and then at 1:30 I'll ring the bell, and we can change postures or keep sitting, and then every 30 minutes after that I'll ring the bell, and if we can make that determination to just change postures on the bell ring, and we'll go like that until 4. And this is a good way to train oneself. So we'll begin now, see how it goes.